Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour. I am your host and guide, Mr. Crispy, speaking to you through uncanny frequencies and sharing with you stories strange, fascinating, and terrifying. The views and opinions expressed on air are solely those of the speaker. The Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour is an entertainment program, and any similarities to any person living or dead, or any place or events, are entirely coincidental. The Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour was created except as indicated by Non-Henshaw. Listener discretion is advised. And now, take Mr. Crispy's moldering hand in yours, ignore that tacky fluid under my nails, and join me for the Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour. Cubelord, give me a weak man that he be a better vessel. I lay in bed having awoken from another one of those dreams, the ones I can never recall details of, but which leave me with an uneasy feeling. My bedside clock read 2:42 a.m., a most inconvenient time. I know when I am awake at this ungodly hour that when dawn breaks the day I will feel as though I didn't get enough sleep. The street below my apartment is quiet. The bars all close at 11 p.m. because of the curfew. I turn on my side and look at the wall. Curious, I haven't noticed it before. A small bubble in the paint the size of a dime. No matter. My eyes are closing when I observe the bubble expand. Now I am wide awake. The bubble is the diameter of a quarter now, and again, now the size expanding to the width of my bedside water glass. In the center of the dilation, a black dot becomes a black disk. Now emerging from the wall, the disk is taking the form of a cylinder. There is a gray cloth band securing a couple of tools, a brush, and some kind of scalpel. I'm frozen, transfixed by the sight of a tall black top hat sitting on my wall as though hung on a hook. Then a milky greenish glow comes from the hole, and a square emerges. Inscribed on the square are 6 dots, 2 rows of 3 separated by a single horizontal line. It is hard to say why, but I feel as though those 6 dots are scrutinizing me with an insect-like intelligence. The horizontal line remains perfectly still. As it happens, the portal in my wall is birthing not a square but a cube. Upon each face the same inscrutable mark of 6 dots, eyes, and separated by a horizontal line, mouth. The luminescence of the cube's eerie light does little to penetrate the gloom of my chamber, and as more of the cube emerges, it appears it is not coming out of a physical hole in the wall, but an ulcer sitting on the surface of, or just below the surface of, the paint itself. Now the cube has completely slid out, the top hat sitting atop of it. More of the entity is emerging now, flowing out of the paint. The form it is taking is that of a slim man wearing a well-tailored suit. It wears a white shirt and a gray vest. A tie as black as night is tied around its neck. The tie contains bursting stars as from an ancient and distant cosmos. The arms emerge, one hand holding a walking staff with some unidentifiable skull atop it. It grips in another hand an oversized bloodshot eye, squeezing it with a wet, squelching crunch that makes me sick to my stomach. Finally, it step slides the rest of its anthropoid body out into my room, Fine slacks the same gray color of the perfectly tailored vest, black herringbone buckled boots with a slight heel. It stands about 7 feet tall, with the top of the hat just about touching the ceiling. It is considering me, from what I can surmise of its body language. It clicks its claws in a rhythm I can only describe as aboriginal, and then it sidles up a step closer to me. I remain paralyzed, repulsed, and enthralled by the sight of the thing. The room now smells of ozone and creosote. It bends down, the cube now half a foot from mine. Though there is no visible evidence of eyes, those hollow dots continue to feel penetrative, inquisitive, hypnotic. The horizontal line is now in my direct eye line, a null, a void, nothing within. I begin to get tunnel vision, and the sensation that I am falling into the line, the only thing I can see. Void surrounds me, and aside from my falling body, there is nothing else. The null crawls below, above, and to the sides of me, crowding me with a feeling like a blanket of needles. All is dark, and I don't know how much time I spent in this state. My next perception is that of the milky green light seeping into my peripheral vision. Soon the light overtakes the blackness, and the needle pricking recedes as well. Suddenly I had the sensation of landing, and I realized I hadn't moved at all from my bed. I am still staring at those 6 dots in line. Then the cube began to move. As it rolls, the hat atop the cube remains perfectly stationary. It is not unlike seeing a die being rolled upon a betting table. From a spot between my eyes, I hear a sound like static, and then a series of voices accompanied by sine waves of different frequencies. The voices didn't say anything I could discern as words. They are more like vocalizing exercises than any coherent language. It is almost exactly like scanning through the AM dial on a radio, where you only catch consonant and vowel sounds before whooshing to the next signal. Most disorienting was the realization that this was all emitting from within my head, and not perceived as sound by my ears. The sounds increased in volume as the spinning of the cube increased its volatility. Still, even as the cube spun and tumbled faster, the dots and lines remained clear and sharp. Suddenly, as though a strong signal was found, a soft and continental voice began to speak behind my eyes. This is what it says. "You may call us Cubelord. We are processing through this dimension, and it takes some time. We have unfolded from a dimension 7 degrees deeper than the one this physical space occupies. There are others deeper than our own which we have not transgressed. We have taken this form in the interest of making something coherent you can abide. This is but a shadow of our hyper-self, which itself is a shadow of a higher hyper-self, and so on. We have processed your mind and deemed it suitably plastic to accept the messages we must transmit to you. It will be painful, the transmission of these messages. It cannot be avoided. Although your mind possesses the necessary plasticity, it may strain your sanity to the point and beyond of breaking. In that case, our quest for a suitable host will continue. However, let us proceed under the assumption your psyche will bear the messages with minimal impact. When the messages are processed, you will need to communicate them. You will not be able to speak the messages. No tongue can contain the glottal stops and sounds it would need to make, and even if it were possible, the message would be corrupted by the air of this plane. You also will be unable to write these messages. No animal language has been invented that can contain the meme blocks to hold the ideas within the concepts of the messages. concept, in fact, does a disservice to the messages, turning them into an unholy and foul blasphemy. The most suitable medium by which these messages may be conveyed most accurately is through a system of hieroglyphs and pictograms. You will use these tools, the brush and the stylus, to bring these messages to reality, and the messages themselves will become reality. Even now, we am processing a form of instruction to you, so that you may purely interpret the messages without clouding from your human quad-dimensional mind. You will render to the sub-quark every curve, dent, hollow, and inscription, leaving no room for error. You will suffer, oh, how you will suffer, and that pain and anguish will inform the messages and make them clearer and clearer. The canvas, yes, the canvas will be these walls, this floor. It will be carved into your eye stalks and excavated from the pink-yielding flesh of your limbs. You will reform your excretions into statues and talismans in service of the messages. Transmissions of the messages will become your only reason for existing, and time spent away from transmissions will represent the bleakest and most depressing of times in your remaining life. You may find correspondences from other emissaries triggering synaptic firings congruent with the messages. Take these down as they arrive. We will visit you from time to time to evaluate your progress and transmit other messages as we see fit. All of this I take in, struggling to understand what it means by messages. The smell of the room becomes stronger, and the form of the Cubelord wavers in front of me, as though itself a distant television signal. With an electric snap, the Cubelord vanishes from sight. I look at the wall, and there is no indication of a portal or even a blemish upon it. Several moments pass, and I realize I haven't breathed. Head trembling and hand shaking. I look again at the bedside clock, 2:17 a.m. My eyes roll into the back of my head, and I pass out. Dawn's light breaks through my blinds, and the sound of traffic pulls me from my slumber. There is a pasty film over my tongue that tastes like gasoline. I get up, and an impulse makes me move to my desk. Sitting there is a stack of parchment, a brush, and a stylus. Without thinking, I grab the stylus and begin to carve the first symbol into my bare foot. He laughs hearty nihilism into my soul. And now from Old Wyoscope's quarterly concern, the meteorological forecast. Chill autumn breezes bring the fog to the region. Caution is advised during early morning and evening hours when the fog will be at its thickest. Take care to not ingest anything upon which the fog has settled, for it causes indigestion and palpitations. A brief but intense heat wave will see temperatures rise to levels unforeseen in modern times. Those with livestock suitable for slaughter ought to do so before October 10th, when the heat wave is expected to reach its zenith. For animals unsuitable for slaughter, please move them to a cool shelter, preferably underground, where they can have a respite from the hot temperatures. Weather watcher Gertrude Klipp of Shawston noted during a recent storm hailstones strange and unexpected. Their color was an opaque blue, and their shape was trapezoidal. A few minutes after striking the ground, they shook and cracked like eggs. The air sizzled about them with a smell of ozone and rubber, and emerging from within, black spiders with dolls' heads and sharks' eyes rolling and blinking gasped a single terrible note before melting into the ground. Miss Clipp can be reached care of the medical staff at Moortop County Hospital for the infirmed, where she is under observation and treatment for hysteria. Now, sage advice and fortunes based on your zodiacal sign. Cancer. The worm welcomes you into its abode, inviting you to Congress. Refusal is not an option, and the pain it delivers to you is a welcoming balm. Lucky numbers 65, 47, 3. Leo. You dig a hole in the soil, a hole in the sand, and a hole in a swamp. Into each of these you bury a part of the traveling salesman who lies dead and festering in your barn. Do it quick. The authorities even now are approaching. Lucky numbers 77, 34, 8. Capricorn. Your doom was sealed hundreds of years ago as your great-great-great-great-great-great-uncle Gustav traded your soul for a parcel of swampland. Lucky for him, that swampland contained minerals useful in the production of weapons for the government. Unlucky for you, the bill is now due. Lucky numbers, none. Scorpio. Celebrations are in order, for your family will be blessed with a new member in the coming year. Never mind its misshapen head and mewling cries for succor. It will all be worth it in the end. Lucky numbers 1, 3, 78. Taurus. Misery and sorrow are in order, for your family will be cursed with a new member in the coming year. Heed when the child is silent, for that will be the best time to be rid of it. Too bad another one will be ready to take its place. Lucky numbers 99, 12, 77. Old Wyethscope's Quarterly Concern presents skills around the house. Painting a barn. In this day and age, there is no skill more handy to have than painting a barn. But so many handy persons think it is just about slathering paint on a surface. Wrong! This article shall cure you of your ignorance and give you results that will make you the pride of the town. Note: do not use these techniques when painting other structures like homes, sheds, fences, and the like. Also, these techniques are not intended for use indoors, on walls or ceilings. Serious peril awaits you if you attempt to use these techniques on anything other than barns. Remove the old paint. A key step is removing the old paint, every damnable flake. This will take some time. It is advised to visit your local chemist for his strongest acid. We have found application with a coarse wire brush does the trick. Reserve unused acid to dispose of bodies utilized in future steps. Treat the wood. The wood of your barn is the very thing making it a barn. Therefore, you ought to treat it with what it wants, and it wants the most tartish of harlots, who can be found in the bigger towns and cities waiting under lamplights after 10 p.m. The older ones with fewer teeth will do the trick nicely. After securing them in the back of your truck, take her back to your place for a bit of fun. The chloroform rag you keep in your nightstand will render her unconscious, at which time you can bind her and begin to apply the switch. When she is good and slick, wheel her to the barn for treatment. If you did it right, after applying all of her to the exposed and satisfied wood, she is now ready for the acid. Apply a layer of primer. After 3 or so days, the wood will be ready to receive its primer. Remembering how the muffled sounds of the horror excited you, tend to your priapism and deposit the result into a pail. You will need to collect 1 gallon pail per 9 square feet of surface to cover. This will take time, but with practice, hydration, and a good diet, it will not take long to have all the primer needed to coat the entire barn. When clouds of flies begin to hover near the barn, work quickly to move to the next step. Apply your first coat of paint. It is good and right the work you have accomplished thus far. Now the time has come to apply your first coat of paint. Combine the horror leavings with an equal portion of livestock blood. Goat, sheep, or cows work best. Stir until the proper hue of red has been accomplished, applying a test coat to your front door to see how the color changes when it dries. When you are pleased with the result, proceed to apply to the barn in strictly up and down strokes, never right to left. Do not dally in your work, and make water or waste in your pants to save time. Apply a second coat of paint. You have made progress, but a second coat will really start to bring this project together. For the next coat of paint, harvest blood from the livestock of neighbors. After all, it takes a village to raise a proper barn. Obfuscate efforts to determine the loss of blood by fabricating clues to a woodland creature being the culprit, or spread rumors of unruly teens partaking in dark ceremonies. In either case, now apply the second coat of paint in circular motions, not straight lines, as this will anger the masters. Preferably, apply this coat under the dark of night to avoid prying, judging eyes. Apply the final coat of paint. Your work is nearly complete, and now is the hardest part. You will create the final batch of paint with your own blood and the blood of your family. Ensure you are properly hydrating yourself and your kin. Easily a pint of blood can be produced daily. A basic centrifuge will forestall any pesky coagulation. When you have enough paint, you all may feel weak, but proceed. As a family, apply the final coat, chanting, "Red, red, red, red is our barn," painting in strictly horizontal lines to the west. Gore dripping from your brushes and hands, stand together in pride at your finely painted barn. And now a feature spotlighting less commonly known congregations for the spiritually seeking and curious. We bring you Behind the Altar. The Economists. Historian Todd Laddie, who's considered the foremost expert on the movement and author of the book Economists, a survey from origins in 1790 through today, believes the Right Reverend Reginald Ferry to be the founder of this Christian splinter congregation in 1790 England, Dorchester. Ferry, born 1740, was a Neo-Puritan scholar who read an early draft of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Ferry writes in his journal of having a revelatory vision where an angel revealed to him the hidden machinations of the human world and the means by which mankind must submit to the Almighty God, whose name is Econome. Ferry produced a tract, The Prophet of God, outlining a decidedly less mystical interpretation of his vision. The pamphlet captured the attention of the elite class at a bankers' convention, and Einem Weishaupt invited Ferry to present at a clandestine conference held in Germany in 1802. Resplendent in a blue waistcoat, Ferry proceeded to proselytize for nearly 2 hours. Those in attendance were reportedly alarmed, intrigued, frightened, and ultimately won over by the presentation. One of the attendees, a young financier, Thornton Wilwick, recorded in his memoir of beholding the terrible and beautiful majesty of Econome in an even more secret summoning ritual after the conference proper concluded. He continues, "About its regal head spun globes of gold and silver. 1,000 eyes rolled madly in its skull, and its teeth ground like stones falling from a great height. It sang in a voice low and sweet, sounding like the pleasant rain of metal upon metal. On its chest shone a bright plate emblazoned with symbols strange. Oh, how they dance in my mind even now! As it demanded no god before it, its 4 arms flexed, demonstrating its strength, which caused us to swoon. About the torso flew a dozen cherubim and seraphim, singing of the coming of the prophet. Their faces were as flame, leaping from the bodies as though they were candlelight. Wings of all the colors of the rainbow provided econome, a semblance of modesty, though the quick glances afforded us did so stir some of our passions as to drive us to frenzied and erotic action. We joined in the chorus of the angelic host, making a merry and ecstatic sound as we saw a cosmic hunger light the deity's eyes. It grabbed one of the angels and bit into its head, green gushes of blood running down its chin as it laughed. Econome, greedy for more, then picked Adam from the crowd as though he were a grape and swallowed him whole. We cried out, "Why?" and in a sweet voice, as boys, he spoke that much blood was needed to appease him, and we could not question the demand, for it was a charge from our Lord. Attendants of the conference and subsequent ritual, most unknown to history, scattered to the four winds and established temples to the worship of this deity. Typically, houses of worship can be found in centers of commerce. Economists, as they're called, can often be identified as white Anglo-Saxon Protestants over the age of 50 who wear blue sports coats and ties. They often shout esoteric combinations of letters and numbers and wildly gesticulate while making facial contortions. They take as their sacrament the derivative of the coca leaf to ensure adequate energy for ministrations at all hours of the day and night. A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. Here's another person to know. Professor David O. Lassiter, the Mad Mizzou Mauler, born 1810, died 1848. David O. Lassiter was born to Judith and Kyle Lassiter of St. Louis in 1810. It was clear from an early age that David had interests in education as well as tendencies towards psychopathy. Neighbors would often harp on Mother and Father Lassiter for the volume of dead mammals, birds, and amphibians strewn about their yards. It is speculated, but not proven, that two younger siblings passed because of some chemical experiments performed by young David. In school, teachers praised David for his cleverness, but noted he often seemed bored in class, scribbling rough sketches of classmates meeting various fatal fates. Due to his grades, he became one of the earliest members of the faculty at the University of Missouri in 1840. Footnote: the University of Missouri insists there was never a faculty member by the name of David O. Lassiter. It was here where Professor Lassiter gained his notoriety as America's first serial killer. It is estimated that he dispatched anywhere from 8 to 38 souls between 1841 and 1846, when he was arrested. Footnote: the disappearance of the Om Beta Psi fraternity class of 1842 is still an outstanding mystery, but it is speculated Professor Lassiter may bear responsibility for their disappearance and likely demise. He was caught after screams were heard emitting from his small house, alarming neighbors to summon the police. Upon entry, they found David sitting calmly at his supper table, in the middle of eating the pancreas of one of his victims directly from the torso. The head of the victim was fashioned into a candle holder, and the wall was painted crimson with the victim's blood, spelling A-B-A-C-A-B. Footnote: Abacab was later the title of the Genesis album from 1981 and the title of one of their hit songs. They could not be reached for comment on any connection to Professor Lassiter. Upon further investigation, several bodies, not all complete, were found in shallow graves in the basement. A speedy trial found David guilty of all counts, and he was sentenced to be executed. While imprisoned, he wrote several scholarly articles which were critical in the development of rocket fuel in the 1920s and 30s by Jack Parsons. Being an election year for the governor and due to public disgust and desire for revenge, David was hung by the neck, his corpse beheaded, drawn and quartered by 4 black stallions, the limbs then burnt in pyres while the head was placed on a pike to be consumed by turkey vultures. Mammon stained its hands, and he could not make them clean. Fiction Corner. Awake, the shadows moving, crawling along the wall, The dark shapes tumbling into other shapes, impossible shapes, and the panic blooms inside my chest. My eyes shifting right to left, up to down, adjusting to the gloom. I reach for my lamp. A click and a brief flash of illumination reveals an insect-like leg before the light is extinguished. I hear a sound like a clicking, but backwards and a sub-bass growl, and a hiss of air inhaled. My heart thrumming madly, and an involuntary whine escapes my lips. I should not have read the passage last night. I should never have picked the cursed book up. I move against the wall. While solid, it is canted at a strange acute angle against my back. Trembling, I peer out of the window and I gape at the sight. The sky is dimly colored ochre, black smoke rising from the city. The skyscape is broken. I don't recognize any of the familiar sights. In the air, undulating discs float, setting those buildings still standing on green fire. Other things with four-jointed legs stalk the neighborhood. I hear the crunching of bodies under their steps, and the screams. Mine joins them as across the street I see the bulbous body of one of the beings. It turns and stares at me, uncountable eyes blinking, uncaring. The motion makes me at once dizzy and nauseous. I stumble, crying out, falling to my knees. Why did I read that book? My rational mind is slipping away, only an animal awareness of danger remains. My breaths are now jagged, along with sounds that aren't words, but expressions of my panic rising. I feel cold sweat pour off my skin, a stink of pure terror. I writhe worm-like, trying to move towards the closet. Inch by inch I slowly make my way until an indescribable tearing sound assaults my ears. The roof of my home is peeled away, revealing the sky, now splitting, exposing black space. In the space, exploding pinpricks of purple-blue light that I would have thought were stars exponentially increase in number. Then I realize it is them that my ignorant reading summoned, the terrifying harbingers decimating the neighborhood, the city, the world. They are nothing compared to them who were written about. My vision starts to wash out. Only white after images are what my mind can perceive. My body refuses to move other than seizures as the new occupants of reality pass into our dimension, and I know no more. Devil of the Marsh by H.B. Marriott Watson. It was nigh upon dusk when I drew close to the great marsh, and already the white vapors were about, riding across the sunken levels like ghosts in a churchyard. Though I had set forth in a mood of wild delight, I had sobered in the lonely ride across the moor, and was now uneasily alert. As my horse jerked down the grassy slopes that fell away to the jaws of the swamp, I could see thin streams of mist rise slowly, hover like wraiths above the long rushes, and then, turning gradually more material, go blowing heavily away across the flat. The appearance of the place at this desolate hour, so remote from human society and so darkly significant of evil presences, struck me with a certain wonder that she should have chosen this spot for our meeting. She was a familiar of the moors, where I had invariably encountered her, but it was like her arrogant caprice to test my devotion by some dreary assignation. The wide and horrid prospect depressed me beyond reason, but the fact of her neighborhood drew me on, and my spirits mounted at the thought that at last she was to put me in possession of herself. Tethering my horse upon the verge of the swamp, I soon discovered the path that crossed it, and, entering, struck out boldly for the heart. The track could have been little used, for the reeds, which stood high above the level of my eyes upon either side, straggled everywhere across in low arches, through which I dodged, and broke my way with some inconvenience and much impatience. A full half-hour I was solitary in that wilderness, and when at last a sound other than my own footsteps broke the silence, the dusk had fallen. I was moving very slowly at the time, with a mind half disposed to turn from the melancholy expedition, which it seemed to me now must surely be a cruel jest she had played upon me. While some such reluctance held me, I was suddenly arrested by a hoarse croaking, which broke out upon my left, sounding somewhere from the reeds in the black mire. A little further it came again from close at hand, and when I had passed on a few more steps in wonder and perplexity, I heard it for the third time. I stopped and listened, but the marsh was as a grave, and so taking the noise for the signal of some raucous frog, I resumed my way. But in a little the croaking was repeated, and coming quickly to a stand I pushed the reeds aside and peered into the darkness. I could see nothing, but at the immediate moment of my pause I thought I detected the sound of some body trailing through the rushes. My distaste for the adventure grew with this suspicion, and had it not been for my delirious infatuation, I had assuredly turned back and ridden home. The ghastly sound pursued me at intervals along the track, until at last, irritated beyond endurance by the sense of this persistent and invisible company, I broke into a sort of run. This, it seemed, the creature, whatever it was, could not achieve, for I heard no more of it, and continued my way in peace. My path at length ran out from among the reeds upon the smooth flat of which she had spoken, and here my heart quickened, and the gloom of the dreadful place lifted. The flat lay in the very center of the marsh, and here and there in it a gaunt bush or withered tree rose like a spectre against the white mists. At the further end I fancied some kind of building loomed up, but the fog which had been gathering ever since my entrance upon the passage sailed down upon me at that moment, and the prospect went out with suddenness. As I stood waiting for the clouds to pass, a voice cried to me out of its center, and I saw her next second with bands of mist swirling about her body, come rushing to me from the darkness. She put her long arms about me, and drawing her close, I looked into her deep eyes. Far down in them, it seemed to me, I could discern a mystic laughter dancing in the wells of light, and I had that ecstatic sense of nearness to some spirit of fire which was wont to possess me at her contact. "At last," she said, "at last, my beloved." I caressed her. "Why," said I, tingling at the nerves, "why have you put this dolorous journey between us? And what mad freak is your presence in this swamp?" She uttered her silver laugh and nestled to me again. "I am the creature of this place," she answered. "This is my home. I have sworn you should behold me in my native sin ere you ravished me away." "Come then," said I have seen. Let there be an end of this. I know you, what you are. This marsh chokes up my heart. God forbid you should spend more of your days here. Come." "You are in haste," she cried. "There is yet much to learn. Look, my friend," she said, "you who know me, what I am. This is my prison, and I have inherited its properties. Have you no fear?" For answer I pulled her to me, and her warm lips drove out the horrid humors of the night. But the swift passage of a flickering mockery over her eyes struck me as a flash of lightning, and I grew chill again. "I have the marsh in my blood," she whispered, "the marsh and the fog of it. Think ere you vow to me, for I am the cloud in a starry night." A lithe and lovely creature, palpable of warm flesh, she lifted her magic face to mine and besought me plaintively with these words. The dews of the nightfall hung on her lashes and seemed to plead with me for her forlorn and solitary plight. "Behold," I cried, "witch or devil of the marsh, you shall come with me. I have known you on the moors, a roving apparition of beauty. Nothing more I know, nothing more I ask. I care not what this dismal haunt means, not what these strange and mystic eyes. You have powers and senses above me. Your sphere and habits are as mysterious and incomprehensible as your beauty. But that I, said, is mine, and the world that is mine shall be yours also." She moved her head nearer to me with an antic gesture, and her gleaming eyes glanced up at me with a sudden flash. the similitude, great heavens, of a hooded snake. Starting, I fell away, but at that moment she turned her face and set it towards the fog that came rolling in thick volumes over the flat. Noiselessly the great cloud crept down upon us, and all dazed and troubled I watched her watching it in silence. It was as if she awaited some omen of horror, and I too trembled in the fear of its coming. Then suddenly out of the night issued the hoarse and hideous croaking I had heard upon my passage. I reached out my arm to take her hand, but in an instant the mists broke over us, and I was groping in the vacancy. Something like panic took hold of me, and, beating through the blind obscurity, I rushed over the flat, calling upon her. In a little the swirl went by, and I perceived her upon the margin of the swamp, her arm raised as an imperious command. I ran to her but stopped, amazed and shaken by a fearful sight. Low by the dripping reeds crouched a small squat thing, in the likeness of a monstrous frog, coughing and choking in its throat. As I stared, the creature rose up upon its legs and disclosed a horrid human resemblance. Its face was white and thin, with long black hair, its body gnarled and twisted as with the ague of 1,000 years. Shaking, it whined in a breathless voice, pointing a skeleton finger at the woman by my side. "Your eyes were my guide," it quavered. "Do you think that after all these years I have no knowledge of your eyes? Lo, is there aught of evil in you I am not instructed in? This is the hell you designed for me, and now you would leave me to a greater." The wretch paused, and panting leaned upon a bush, while she stood silent, mocking him with her eyes, and soothing my terror with her soft touch. "Hear," he cried, turning to me, "hear the tale of this woman, that you may know her as she is. She is the presence of the marshes. Woman or devil, I know not, but only that the accursed marsh has crept into her soul, and she herself is become its evil spirit. She herself, that lives and grows young and beautiful by it, has its full power to blight and chill and slay. I, who was once as you are, have this knowledge. What bones lie deep in this black swamp, who can say but she? She has drained of health, she has drained of mind and soul. What is between her and her desire that she should not drain also of life? She has made me a devil in her hell, and now she would leave me to my solitary pain, and go search for another victim. But she shall not, he screamed through his chattering teeth. She shall not. My hell is also hers. She shall not. Her smiling, untroubled eyes left his face and turned to me. She put out her arm, swaying towards me, and so fervent and so great a light glowed in her face that, as one distraught of superhuman beings, I took her into my embrace. And then the madness seized me. "Woman or devil," I said, "I will go with you. Of what account this pitiful past? Blate me even as that wretch, so be only you are with me." She laughed and, disengaging herself, leaned half-clicking to me towards the coughing creature by the mire. "Come," I cried, catching her by the waist. "Come!" She laughed, again a silver-ringing laugh. She moved with me slowly across the flat, where the track started for the portals of the marsh. She laughed and clung to me. But at the edge of the track I was startled by a shrill, hoarse screaming. And behold, from my very feet, that loathsome creature rose up and wound his long black arms about her, shrieking and crying in his pain. Stooping, I pushed him from her skirts, and with one sweep of my arm drew her across the pathway. As her face passed mine, her eyes were wide and smiling. Then, of a sudden, the still mist enveloped us once more, but ere it descended, I had a glimpse of that contorted figure trembling on the margin, the white face drawn and full of desolate pain. At the sight, an icy shiver ran through me, and then through the yellow gloom the shadow of her darted past me to the farther side. I heard the hoarse cough, the dim noise of a struggle, A swishing sound, a thin cry, and then the sucking of the slime over something in the rushes. I leapt forward, and once again the fog thinned, and I beheld her, woman or devil, standing upon the verge, and peering with smiling eyes into the foul and sickly bog. With a sharp cry wrung from my nerveless soul, I turned and fled down the narrow way from that accursed spot, and as I ran, the thickening fog closed round me, and I heard far off and lessening still the silver sound of her mocking laughter. And now from old Wyethscope's quarterly concern, In the Fields, being a source of knowledge regarding crops, livestock, and other agricultural topics. On making a healthy meal for your livestock. Livestock diet is vital for a healthy animal. Our crack team of nutritional scientists have created a meal plan which they call terrifically suitable for all of the animals on your farm. You'll need 1 industrial-sized cauldron and elm wood for the best results. Into the cauldron, add 4 gallons of well water. Ignite the elm wood. Do not use accelerant. Bring the water to a boil and then add the following previously gathered ingredients. 1 horse femur, 1 bale seasoned hay, spangled or spotted variety, 1 fist-sized clump of peat soil, 2-pound sack of industrial cornmeal, 5 pounds of Amanita mushrooms, 1 boar belly trimmed. Return to a boil while stirring. The mushrooms will leach their color to the stew, lending it a pinkish hue. Sing the following words. Terrific time to bubble, a meal unto my animals. Look inside and you will see the things we ought not to be. By now, the cauldron should be producing a bluish smoke, and your vision should be starting to double. Take a short break to contemplate the universe. When you've regained lucidity, continue stirring, adding more elm to the wood as needed to maintain the boil, until the consistency of a thick paste is reached. Let cool before transferring to a trough and your bowl. Sit cross-legged with the animals and eat in communion with them, for you are a dumb animal too. You may gnaw on the rubbery horse's femur, since you were the one who prepared the meal. Strip off your clothes, for a real animal is free. Talk to the hogs and ignore the sheep. Fear the goat. Engage in intimate embraces with the cow per their consent. When the abomination of your union is born, sacrifice it to the yawning star Yeragot before it can mule a syllable in defiance. Drape the sacrifice's skin over your shoulders and mourn for 5 years, 6 months, and 3 days, as is the custom. As your other stock passes over to the next dimension, consume their flesh and drink their blood in honor of their time, passing it among your animal family. We now bring you dates of import. September 12th, Mantis Day. At dawn on September 12th, arise and greet the day with cheerful manner, for it is Mantis Day. Don the traditional costume of green robes along with the serrated knife arms. Click them together in a noisome clanking, and set to your breakfast meal of scrambled eggs, toast with jelly, and face bacon of your loved one. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then, sated for now, repair to the local pub to make merry with your peers and seek out a suitable mate. After some coital activity, use those serrated knife arms to dispatch your partner's head. Be sure to save that delicious mate meat for breakfasts and suppers with the kids. October 23rd through 30th, the days of trouble. Caution is the watchword, for now are the days of trouble. From out of the shadows step denizens whose purpose is mayhem and chaos. Each step is a ticking clock down through the time of doom. Beware salespersons who smile a beat too long, for they want more than your cold hard cash. A child's chuckle belies a sinister aspect, a trick to be played on you that might prove fatal. It is best not to think about what will happen after sunset. August 8th through 18th, the doldrums of summer. It is said in the book of Glorgun that the summer days at this point are the most unbearable and unpleasant to good menfolk and womenfolk. As a means of escape for adherents of the rare and secret society, cult, religion, it is advised that caves be dug out and congregants hibernate inside for a period of 10 days. After the 10th day they shall emerge and break their fast with fowl of a mottled color and a goat that winks while defecating. November 18. Harvest's End. All good things come to an end, and the harvest is one of them. Your fields have been plucked of all they have to offer, and you gaze upon your silos and storehouses and sigh, wishing there was more. It is time to prepare for the cold months ahead, and question whether next year will be better or worse than this one. Take care to treat the barren soil with the necessary nutrients, chemicals, and leavings to appease your gods. We now bring you newsworthy items, bulletins of interest from around the region. Guilty verdict in Bufkin family massacre case. A jury of 12 on Wednesday handed down a verdict of guilty in the scandalous Bufkin family massacre trial of Peter Bufkin. Young Peter was found guilty of murder in the first degree of his sister Abigail, Mother Gertrude, Father Paul, and Great-Aunt Petunia by the jury of 4 women persons and 8 men persons. Sentencing by the Honorable Judge Mark Hoy is expected within the week. As the decision was read, Peter sat mute with an impish grin on his cherubic face. No mercy is expected for the 6-year-old Peter due to the extremity of the crimes and clear lack of remorse. Traffic jam enters 30th hour on State Route 5. A traffic jam on State Route 5 entered its 30th hour on Sunday, which is responsible for at least 4 deaths. Authorities are still determining the root cause of the traffic jam, which is between mile markers 23 and 68. Black smoke can be seen rising from as far away as Fudgeshaw, but police have been thus far unable to penetrate the stopped cars. There are reports that at least half of the cars are abandoned, with the drivers wandering the fields nearby saying, "The end is near." Unmelted snow mound entering its 3rd winter. On the corner of Smith and West 3rd Avenue in Silloville, an unmelted snow mound defies one of the hottest summers on record to enter its 3rd winter. A cordon has been set up to prevent community members from getting too close, as it has absorbed 5 young children since its first appearance. We recall that when we first brought you this story 2 years ago, snow maintenance crews were driven away by waves of static and chittering whispers from within the mound. "It gives the town character," says Alderman Chad, and we've grown to accept its presence in our fair town, provided it doesn't ask for more children. We now bring you trivia and facts to impress your company. A full-grown man can live for 30 days on hominy alone. Pope Franklin S. Eisenhower served for 55 non-consecutive years in the 1800s in the catacombs under the streets of Vatican City. It is not only permitted but encouraged by law in 5 states to offer a dowry of an amputated digit, the potential husband's own, to the family of the betrothed when asking permission to marry. And now, wisdom, advice, and prognostications. Sound words to live by. The houndstooth snail is the only terrestrial creature capable of perpetual subsistence on its own waste, the waste taking the form of its shell, which the snail then consumes. It is poised to become the dominant form of life on Earth in the year 2543 CE. All hail our houndstooth lord! The coming of the Rubots, with 2-headed dingoes emerging from their marsupial pouches, will prove man's folly and hearken the rise of the crab lords. Leaves arranged in a hexagram in your garden are a bad sign. Watch for sinister rabbits. Dominance in financial matters sees short-term rewards, but be cautious of long-term risks. Where am I? The last thing I remember is a sour drink and red eyes. Oh God, where am I? Where am I? And now I bid you a restless night. May you cower in the corner until morning's light. And in the harsh daylight you will see no one really gets out of jail free. Thank you for listening to the Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour. The Get Out of Jail Free Radio Hour was written, produced, edited, and uploaded by Matt Henshaw, except as indicated.